Alright, so we have our sprites imported, we have our flipbooks created, and now we have to implement the functionality that's going to make this actually an interactive game. We have to go into what Unreal calls blueprints. Blueprints are the visual programming language that is built on top of underlying C++ coding type in Unreal. So in order to do that, the code that we're changing at this point is all based around the 2D side-scroller character. So go ahead and click on the character, and if you could right-click on the character to do this, edit 2D side-scroller, or you can go up to the world outliner, and you can see to the right here it says edit 2D side-scroller character as well. You can click that. It's going to load up all of these little boxes and wires that you're going to see. So these are blueprints. This is a character blueprint for our character, Mario in this case. And I'm just going to take a little tour here and show you what's going on. This looks kind of scary, but it's actually relatively straightforward. And we're going to be using what we have here to build on, do a little bit more complex animation, and build out our character. So in this section here, you can see that there's comments, which are nice. They can help add clarity to what the heck this stuff is. It's really easy to get confused and not understand what's going on, especially if you don't work on the project for a few days. You come back to it and you don't know where to start again. So this is the default project, and we're going to be building off all this stuff. You can see it's already been commented. There's different sections, like one that handles animation, one that handles the movement of the character, one that controls the rotation of the sprite based on if we're pressing left or right, a whole section that handles the jumping. I'm going to walk through these here. So in this section here, we have an input node. Input nodes in Unreal are red, and this is constantly kicking out a signal. And the signal's getting kicked out from this update node, and it's running into this node over here. It's called setFlipbook. Remember flipbooks from last time? Flipbooks are the animations of the sprites. You can see that it says sprite right there. That's what we're controlling, the sprite graphic on our player character, Mario in this case. So what flipbook are we setting? If we follow the blue line here, we run into the select node. And the select node it's an either or, it's a true or false, it's a yes or no, it's sort of like a Boolean switch of two different options. And these two different options are being controlled by this other parameter. You see the red line coming out of the index on the select. There is a greater than sign here. So we have something happening if a value is greater than 0. And you can see it reflected in the select node. It says, is that true or is that false? And based on what that value is, it's going to kick out and control what the graphic is in this flipbook. In this case, either an idle animation flipbook or a running flipbook for your character. So if we follow to the left of the greater than symbol here, the value that we're actually trying to figure out if it's greater than 0 or not is velocity of our character. Essentially, if our character is moving, if it's greater than 0, if our velocity is greater than 0, if that's true, play the running animation. If it's not true, if it's 0, remember this is greater than, not greater than or equal to. If it's 0, then it's false. It's not greater than 0. 0 is not greater than 0, 0 is 0. Then it's false, it's idle animation. Those are the two default options that are set up right now. Eventually we are going to add functionality to this to be able to have a jump, a fall, a crouch, all that sort of stuff. But right now we just have these two things. So let's go ahead and plug in our own animations. If I click on the drop downs in the select node here, just swap the existing ones out for the ones with Mario that we have. So I'm going to swap the idle animation for the little robot character with the Mario idle. I'm going to swap the running animation in true with the walking flipbook for Mario. And if I play this now, one thing I like to do when I'm in the blueprint window is I'll click the little drop down next to play and go to new editor window. This will just lay a new editor window on top of the blueprints rather than having to juggle back and forth between multiple windows, multiple tabs. Hey, look at that. There is our character. It's not the robot anymore. And if I move, I should be able to move. One thing that's a problem here, though, is that the left and right are reversed. Remember I was talking about earlier how this was going to be a problem because the sprite of the robot character was facing to the right when it was created, and the sprite for our Mario character was facing to the left. So the math is backwards. It's a really easy fix. We can fix it just by swapping a few numbers. So let's go ahead and do that now. Also, you can see we have jumping working too. Jumping is really simple to do. It's not really a jump animation though that's being triggered. It's just making our character jump, and you can see that the walking animation is playing. Because as it is right now, the code cannot differentiate between velocity from jumping and velocity from just moving on the ground left or right. We will build that in going forward. Let's flip the animation though, so left is left and right is right, because right now that's backwards. If your character is designed facing right, then you wouldn't have to do this. This is just because the default character was facing to the right originally. All right, I'm going to go down to the ticks animation section here. And if you hold down your right mouse button, that's how you can pan around this area. You can zoom in and out with the scroll wheel on your mouse. And obviously you can drag out a marquee selection with the left mouse button. In this tick animation section, this code right here is controlling which direction our character is facing. And since this is a 2D character, all it's doing is just rotating the flat plane 180 degrees based off of if we're moving left or right. So if I look at this here, we have this event tick that's constantly kicking out a signal. It's running into update animation. It's updating the animation of the character. And then we're getting the velocity from the movement on the x-axis because we're just moving side to side. And we have this node right here, compare float, that is getting if we are increasing in values with greater than or decreasing in values with less than, or if we're equal to that. And it's the greater than or less than that is controlling the rotation. These nodes over on the right, this is the things that we have to change because our graphic was backwards. So in Make Rotator, right now you can see that the z-axis here is set to 0, and then down on this one down here it's set to 180. If we just reverse these values and make the 0 180, and make the one that is currently 180 0, we're just flipping the plane around, flipping the sprite around to match the way it was actually designed. If I go ahead and click play now, I move to the right, and I walk to the right. I move to the left, I walk to the left. So I'm no longer moonwalking backwards. Everything's fixed now. Cool. One more thing here. We're going to look at this code down here for the jump. This code's very simple. Built into Unreal here, we have nodes that are native that for jumping. You can see that we have these two input actions. One is getting keyboard presses for detecting if we're jumping or not, and the other one is getting touch presses, perhaps from a tablet or a touchpad on your laptop, something like that. We can add more buttons to these things. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But you can see when they're pressed and released, it is triggering these nodes over on the right. If we press the jump button, make the character jump. When we release the jump button, stop jumping. Let the character fall back down to whatever it lands on, whatever it collides with, in this case, one of our platforms. Eventually we're going to build this up to be a little bit more complicated because we're going to want things to fall, be able to crouch, but we don't want to be able to jump while crouching perhaps. We don't want to ever be able to crouch while jumping. Maybe you build a game where you want that functionality. But for us, we're going to build this out a little bit going forward. Let me show you where to add the different key presses. So if you go back to your level and you go to the settings button up here and go to project settings, on the left side, down in the engine section, there's a section called input. You click input, you get a section up top here called bindings. This is where you bind button presses, keyboard inputs, any sort of input device. This is where you're mapping those inputs to actions inside the gaming engine. So action mappings would be buttons, axis mappings would be movement, whether you're pressing an arrow button on a keyboard or using an analog joystick on a gamepad. So if I click the drop down for action mappings, you see jump is already there. The reason that we had that input action for jump in our blueprint is because that was designated here in the project settings. If I click on the drop down for jump, we can see all of the buttons that the project default had set for controls to jump. If I hit the W key, I will jump. If I hit the up key on my arrow keys, I will jump. If I hit the space bar, I'll jump. If I hit whatever the face button bottom on a gamepad is, probably an X button on an Xbox controller. It depends on the controller, they're all different. All these things are set up right now to cause that input action in the blueprint to trigger and kick out a value that is currently set to make the character jump. If I go back to the blueprint, that's why this is called input action jump, is because it was called jump in the project settings for input and action mappings. We are going to have to define one of these in the next section for crouch. Crouch isn't set up right now, so we're going to create an input in the project settings called crouch, and we're going to assign different buttons to it, probably C and maybe the control button on the keyboard makes the most sense. Alright, so I'm going to stop recording here and we'll move into the next section where we add even more functionality with falling animation, jumping animation, crouching animation, and hooking up all of those things in blueprints. We're going to have to change quite a bit of stuff, but it's fairly straightforward.